Good morning, my name is Joelle George, and this is my penny experiment. As you see here, I have my white vinegar and table salt. In the smaller container here, I have my 4th cup of vinegar and then my teaspoon of salt. Then I have several different pennies. I thought it was worth pointing out that when I went to sort through the pennies, I could instantly tell which ones were older just based on their color. These pennies are all from the 2000s and are still pretty shiny. Of course, these pennies are darker for reasons I'll explain later. I organized them into 2 different categories. These pennies are from 1982 or earlier, and these are from after 1982. Then I also found a Canadian penny from 1974 that I thought would be interesting to try out. For the experiment today, I'm going to focus on these older, dirtier coins as opposed to the new coins. But first, we're going to go ahead and take this salt and dump that into the vinegar. And just gonna stir this with my plastic spoon until it's completely mixed together. Just waiting for it to completely dissolve into the vinegar. Okay. So as you can see, we have that mixed together here. Now I'm going to take some of these pennies. The oldest one I found was from 1946. I'm going to go ahead and put that in there, as well as a couple of these other old pennies. And Canadian penny. Wow, and pretty much immediately they are lightening up. Just give it a few seconds and see what happens here. These ones that are brightening immediately, I'm going to go ahead and move over to the water. I am going to take a couple of them as the video had suggested and move it right from the vinegar to the paper towel. And we're going to take that Canadian penny and see what happens to that as well on the paper towel. So we'll come back to these guys in a second. We'll keep these separated, so all the pennies that were placed directly on the paper towel over here. Then I'm going to take my ones soaked in water and put them on the right side of the paper towel. We'll come back to that and see if there are any differences. Okay. All right, so now we're going to transition over to our explanation for what exactly happened here. So essentially, when copper is exposed to oxygen, that forms copper oxide, and that is what can make our pennies look dirty. Then in the experiment, the vinegar or acetic acid combines with table salt or sodium chloride to break up copper oxide and exposes the pure copper. The copper from the copper oxide does remain in this vinegar salt liquid. blue copper 2 oxide ion is formed, which is soluble in water. So I'm assuming then that by putting our pennies into the water, that allowed that copper oxide to be soluble in the water and leave the coin. Any other acid could be used, like lemon or orange juice. Okay, so into the science of what happened here. First, the copper reacts with oxygen gas to create copper oxide. This, of course, had happened before our experiment. So you can see the copper oxygen creates copper oxide. In our experiment, we take the copper oxide reacts with the vinegar or acetic acid and table salt, sodium chloride, to create that copper 2 acetate, which is here, the hydrogen chloride, and sodium oxide. As we mentioned before, the copper 2 ion is soluble in water, which is why dunking that coin in the water afterwards prevents that malachite formation. And then this is just down here, just like visual representation of kind of what happens with our copper oxide, vinegar, salt, turning into our copper 2 acetate. Worth noting is some history on the penny. Pennies made prior to 1982 were made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. After 1982, they started using a lot less copper, so 97.5% zinc and much less copper, 2.5%. The Canadian penny that I used was from 1974, which I looked up, and Canadian pennies in that year were made with 95.5% copper, 3% tin, and 1.5% zinc. Theoretically, the effect should be greater on the pennies that were minted before 1982 because they contain much more copper. A real-life example that I thought was pretty interesting was the Statue of Liberty, which I learned is made of about 100 tons of copper. This is a picture of the Statue of Liberty from when it was first unveiled. Of course, now we know today it looks much different and is much more green. So it was brown in 1886. Then in about 20 years, it had turned green. And then I learned there had been talks of painting it over to disguise the green color. Luckily, they decided to preserve the statue in its original, how it was originally made. Finally, we're going to check up on our pennies here. So like we said, these ones on the left were taken right from the solution and onto the paper towel. We have our Canadian penny in here too. The experiment had said that maybe we would get a little bit of that malachite or verdigris formation. Don't see any of that right now, but that's okay. And then these are our pennies that were put into water. So let's take a look and see. Most of the pennies do look much lighter. Looks like, yeah, especially the ones that were minted before 1982. Although, honestly, they all look quite a bit better. The only one that didn't really change is this guy right here. He's from 1987. So not sure what exactly is going on with that one, but overall successful experiment. Thank you.